Hey, it's Catherine with Free Tours by Foot. Today I'm going to take you on a walk around the World Trade Center. We'll see the memorial pools, the new World Trade Center buildings, Liberty Park, the Oculus, and a lot more. So let's go ahead and get started. So we are starting right here in the Memorial Plaza. We'll be walking around the entire plaza today, both reflecting pools. I'm a little close right now, so I won't be able to look up and show you the buildings quite yet. I'll wait till I'm a little bit further back. And we'll also be seeing a few of the important buildings relating to September 11th, 2001 that are outside of the Trade Center technically. So the first thing we are going to go and see and walk around is the North Memorial Pool. So there are two pools. Other than the names around them, they do look identical to one another. So the name of this memorial is called Reflecting Absence. In the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks, they had a design competition not only for the rebuild of the Trade Center itself, the buildings, but for a memorial. So this was a separate design competition. I'll give you a look in this way. So those waterfalls that you can see inside are the largest man-made waterfalls in North America. So they go down into the first part of the pool, like you can see, and then I'm gonna look and see that square cut out in the middle. That's called the void. And so the water continues to go down into the void. It's purposely designed so that no matter where you're standing, anywhere around this, you will not be able to see the bottom of the void. So the entire purpose, the whole design concept here is it's meant to represent loss. That's why everything is indented. You have the memorial pool itself that's going right down into the ground, and you have the names also cut out rather than raised. So this is meant to represent the loss that was suffered here. So this was a design competition separate, like I said, from the building design competition for the World Trade Center. It's not just the pools themselves, it's actually all of the landscaping that you see as well. Because it was so important, so lots of construction noise, I'm sure you can hear it in the background. Even though it has been nearly 20 years since September 11, 2001, this is still very much an active construction site. There is still building going on here. Get right past these people. So all of these trees that we're walking by here and all of the trees that you see around the plaza, this was a joint collaboration of Michael Arad and Paul Walker. Paul Walker was the landscape designer. Michael Arad designed these pools here. And so all of these trees are swamp white oak trees. So the selection process was a lot more rigorous than you would probably think. They were really trying to choose trees that were native to this area. They wanted something that would look nice in all four seasons. And they wanted to source trees from the places where lives had been lost. So New York, Pennsylvania, and Northern Virginia, DC area. So they chose swamp white oaks. Also, the other really important criteria is these needed to be able to withstand the rigors of being a tree in New York City, which the city can be hard on a lot of trees. So swamp white oaks were chosen. They are beautiful, they are durable. They exhausted all of the nurseries in those three areas to try to source these trees. When that still didn't give them enough, they went and started offering to take trees from people's yards. I know that sounds a little bit crazy, but they really did want the sourcing to be from those three places. And so in some cases, these trees were donations from people's private homes. So now you can see the other side of the memorial here And obviously names carved out all along the sides. So the names around the memorial pools are the names of the nearly 3,000 people who were killed on September 11th, 2001. Additionally, there are 6 other names on the memorial pools, and those are the names of 6 people that were killed in a World Trade Center bombing in 1993. They are on here as well. You can see the rose on the one name there. That's done on people's birthdays. So the way the names were laid out and the way they're organized, it looks really random to some people. So I'm going to come in here. You're going to see these are not alphabetized or anything like that. So the way they laid out whose names are going to go where, some of it was geographically specific. The names of the people along this pool are the names of the people that were killed in the North Tower of the World Trade Center. So this is the exact location of the original North Tower of the Twin Towers. This void goes right down towards the foundation slab from the North Tower. So because the North Tower was actually struck first, it did have a higher fatality rate than the South Tower. So the names around the North Tower pool are all people that were killed in the North Tower.
So if you're enjoying the tour so far, go ahead and hit the like button. It helps others discover the video. If you'd like to see more like this one, subscribe to our channel. We have walks across the Brooklyn Bridge, through Harlem, Central Park, all over New York. Visit our website for more about our tours, our travel tips, and more. We also have virtual tours and channels that focus on Washington, D.C., New Orleans, London, and more. Look for free tours by foot wherever you travel. You can support your guide with virtual tips, links in the description. And let us know what else you want to see. Leave a comment below. Now, back to the tour.
So heading over here, we're heading towards the South Memorial Pool. It is identical in appearance to the North Memorial Pool. It is also set over the foundation slab, of course, in this case of the South Tower. And the names around the South Memorial Pool are names of people that were killed in the South Tower of the World Trade Center, but also the names of the people killed at the Pentagon, the people on Flight 93 in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and any of the first responders as well. So you can see over there it says Flight 175. Over here is the first responders plaque. So they do have some headings. The New York City Fire Department, it lays it out by battalions or by squads. And that's just, it's helpful for people who are looking for a particular name. The other way they laid the names out, besides geographic specificity or laying them out in groups like this, is through what they called meaningful adjacencies. And that is pretty much a fancy way of saying people that were close in real life are next to each other on the memorial. So rather than just going strictly alphabetically or something like that, people who are next to one another are oftentimes friends, co-workers, in some cases even family members. And so they are together here on the memorial. So now that we are a little further away, I can start to show you some of the buildings here. So look up at number 1 World Trade Center. Tallest building in the Western Hemisphere, 1,776 feet tall. Very, very specific number, and that is to commemorate 1776, the year the US declared independence. Just to the right of it is number 7 World Trade Center. So number 1 World Trade Center, you've probably heard the name Freedom Tower. That's become the really popular nickname for it. It's actually not an official name at all. The official name is 1 World Trade Center. So it does actually share a name and an address with the former North Tower of the Twin Towers, and it is directly next to where the North Tower would have been. Similarly, number 7 World Trade Center is right where the former number 7 World Trade Center was. So the only buildings that were struck by planes in the Trade Center on September 11th were the Twin Towers themselves. The falling debris from the towers caused number 7 World Trade to catch fire. It burned until later on that evening and also collapsed. The other buildings of the Trade Center were crushed by falling rubble and debris. Number 7 was the first of the new buildings to be finished. That was finished back in 2007. Number 1 World Trade Center opened up to the public in 2015. And there's an observation deck up there. If you want a very, very different view than going to the observation deck at, say, the Empire State Building, top of the rock. This tree over here is the only tree in the entire complex that is not a swamp white oak. I had said every single tree was. That was really not correct because this one is not. This is an Ellery pear tree. Do not come here hoping to pick pears. This does not produce fruit at all, but it does have really pretty white flowers in the spring. We missed them, they're gone already. But this tree was actually found in the rubble at the World Trade Center when they were doing the cleanup here on Ground Zero in the aftermath. It was charred and broken down, but it was still alive. And so they took it out of the Trade Center rubble. It was taken to a nursery. It was brought back to health. It was regrown. And they said as soon as there was a Trade Center Plaza to put it in, it would come back to its home. Not only were they able to regrow it, but they actually took cuttings from this tree and they were able to grow saplings of several more pear trees. We call this the survivor tree because of its story. And those little sapling trees, when there are terrorist events or attacks anywhere in the world, we will oftentimes send one of our survivor tree saplings to that location. So it's a really important part of the World Trade Center Plaza, and a big part of the story here, besides that there was a lot of tragedy and a lot of loss, is an enormous amount of resilience. New York really prides itself on being a very, very resilient city. And once cleanup was finished here on the World Trade Center site, nearly a year after the September 11 attacks, they decided it was time to rebuild here. And so there were a lot of different opinions and feelings on what should be built here, how it should be built. And so they went with a design competition. If you've ever gone on a tour of New York City or even joined me on any other walks like this, you've probably heard me reference design competitions over and over and over again. We seem to use them a lot. That's what they did here. There was multiple criteria for what they wanted here. One of the things that was really important, and this applied to both the design of the Trade Center itself and to the memorial pools here, was that right after September 11th, 2001, the original World Trade Center, or whatever was left of it that was a safe, viable structure, became national landmarks. And so what that meant is now legally, whoever was designing the future Trade Center, but also the pools, was now legally obligated to preserve those structures and make them accessible to the public. What was left after September 11th, 2001 was not much. It was the foundation slabs of the North and South Towers, and then some underground retaining walls that were from the construction of the original World Trade Center. So this part of Manhattan that we're in right now, we're pretty close to the Hudson River these days, but originally we would have been in the Hudson River. All of this area is landfill. So that made construction of the original Trade Center complicated. They had to build basically a big concrete bathtub to keep the water out of the construction site and be able to lay the foundations. So there is a massive retaining wall called a Slurry Wall, and that's to keep the Hudson River out. So the condition of the Slurry Wall on September 11th was a major source of concern for the city. There was so much coming down, there was a lot of rumbling, the ground was moving. Had the Slurry Wall not held underground, you would have had water flooding into the site. It would have been going into electrical lines, subway tunnels. The Slurry Wall did hold. and it was kind of seen as another sign of resilience and strength in New York City. And now it was one of the original parts of the World Trade Center that they were legally obligated to make accessible to the public, and it was 7 stories underground. So that led to the museum here. So that's this building that we're walking alongside. This is the National September 11th Memorial Museum. The building itself looks pretty small, actually, from the outside. It's an interesting design. It just looks kind of like a prism. But this is really only the entrance to the museum. I'll get closer to the windows and see if I can show you into the inside at all. But the bulk of the museum is actually about 7 stories underground, and it is built around the original Slurry Wall. So if you go to the museum and you go down into it, you will see parts of the original structure of the Trade Center. It's an interesting way of building, and they did such a wonderful job with the museum. I highly, highly, highly recommend it if you're going to be coming to New York City. Don't know that I'll really be able to show you much into the inside, but this is the corner of the museum here. Walking around it, you can maybe just see in. There's some beams and girders from the original Trade Center in there. So with all of this to contend with, they opened up their design competition. Daniel Libeskind was the architect that won the design competition, so he is considered the master architect of the World Trade Center complex. But that's definitely not to say that he designed every single thing that we're seeing here. Of course, we talked about how the landscaping was done by Paul Walker, the memorial was done by Michael Arad, but the general layout, the design, how we moved forward with this plan was based off of the work of Daniel Libeskind. So some other buildings, now that we're over on this side, there's number 4 World Trade Center. And over here, number 3, right next to it. So when they started releasing the designs of these buildings, what the future Trade Center was going to look like, of course, you had lots of differing opinions on what should be here, how it should look. I think generally, as more and more of it has started to come together, the response has been very positive. The buildings individually, in some cases, don't look like much. Number 7's a good example. But with the whole and the overall effect, looking at these buildings together, it really is pretty beautiful. Lots of light, lots of reflection. I think a very respectful way of commemorating the buildings that were here, the events that happened here, the lives that were lost. And so it's kind of a unique combination of, I mean, this is an office plaza. There are lots of businesses in here. Actually, when number 1 World Trade Center officially announced that they were building, Condé Nast, the publishing company, I think claimed about 50% of the building. So there are a lot of people working here, but it's also obviously a memorial as well. There are ceremonies that happen here every year on September 11th, 2001. Oftentimes, if you're visiting, just a good thing to know, if you're visiting New York City around that time and you want to come down here, generally I would say don't plan on being here on September 11th, especially in the morning. Okay, we're gonna head out and I'm gonna try to be stealthy. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
Thank you, you too. Whoop, there we go. So on the actual day of, on the anniversary, there are often ceremonies that happen here. They are not typically open to the public. They are only for family members, friends of survivors, and victims. So right over here, more construction. This is, believe it or not, a part of the World Trade Center reconstruction, even though it is St. Nicholas Greek Orthodox Church. So I'm going to come over here because you'll actually be able to see a rendering of how it will look when it's finished. It's an interesting design there. So it might sound strange that they're building a church as a part of the rebuild of the World Trade Center, but St. Nicholas was destroyed on September 11th, 2001. And so they made it a condition of the rebuild of the Trade Center that they would rebuild St. Nicholas, and it would be done in a way that would blend with the rest of the World Trade Center. So right here behind St. Nicholas, we're going to walk up these stairs over here. So this is Liberty Park up here. We're actually going up on top here, and we'll get a nice view out over the plaza. So Liberty Park is a little more recent addition. This only opened a few years ago. And we are actually now standing on top of part of what is called the Vehicular Security Compound, which is not all that exciting sounding, but it is a security feature meant to keep unauthorized traffic out of the Trade Center itself. And we had to have it, and they decided that since we needed this feature and it wasn't on its own the most attractive thing in the world, that perhaps something could be done to make it a little bit better. And so Liberty Park was created, just a small 1-acre park on top of it. A really cool piece of art right here. So Liberty Park, goes right along the side of St. Nicholas Greek Orthodox Church. You can see over here, this is the Anne Frank tree, dedicated on June 12th, 2017, descendant of the chestnut tree that was outside the annex in Amsterdam where Anne Frank and her family hid. So that's right there. So this is pretty tiny up here, but it actually, I think, feels dramatically quieter, just being not all that far away from the Trade Center and away from the traffic. It's amazing what a difference it can make. So something else that's really important that's in this park is straight ahead. Now that our trees are starting to fill in, I'll have to get closer, but this is the Sphere. This is actually a piece of the original World Trade Center. If you ever saw photos of the original Trade Center, you probably actually recognize this. This was an art piece designed by a German artist, Paul Koenig, and it was meant to, in its original form, represent peace through world trade, which is one of the aims of the Trade Center itself. You can see how damaged it was in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks. And it's actually moved several times. It was in Battery Park for a time. It was over in New Jersey for a time. A lot of people felt, though, that it should return to its original home, and it finally has. The artist himself actually resisted for a while, but then said actually the damage that was on the piece had almost morphed it into something different. It had a different meaning, and the piece itself was more of a memorial than it was when he designed it initially. I'm going to come over and give you a quick look at the really beautiful view of the Trade Center from Liberty Park. Definitely something you'll want to do when you're here. So we're just one street over, but now you can get a great clear look at number 1 and number 7 over there. The shorter, squarer building is the museum. You probably couldn't really get an idea of what the museum looked like from there. The memorial pool just in front of the museum, the South Memorial Pool. Numbers 3 and 4 right over here. And you can probably just see the spiky tips of another building. We will be going to see that in just a minute. That's the Oculus. But we're gonna double back, turn around to go out of Liberty Park, but I'm going to show you just one other sculpture that's in here. There is an official name for this sculpture, but most people just call it the Horse Soldier Monument. But it's actually called the America's Response Monument. You can see right here. So this is dedicated to a particular special forces group that were charged with entering Afghanistan and targeting Taliban groups in the immediate aftermath of 9/11. And because of the terrain that they were going to have to go over, they had to ride horses over some pretty rough terrain. So that's why we ended up with the America's Response Monument, or the Horse Soldier Monument. Now we have some greenery filling in, now that it's finally spring, soon summer. So I think we're anticipating more and more people to come out in the streets here as the weather is getting nicer. But I wanted to make sure we came up here and saw this, because I think a lot of people don't make it up into Liberty Park, and it's not very big. Like I said, it's only an acre, but I do think if you're coming to the World Trade Center, it's something that you shouldn't miss. Oh, that's a very pretty flowering tree, whatever that is. If anybody watched my Central Park walk, you know I'm not a botanist, but I like flowers. We're gonna come down here, and there's another small monument that I want you to see over on the wall over here. It's actually a firefighter's monument. There were many New York City firefighters that were killed on September 11th. And so they are memorialized over here. There's actually a fire station right on this corner, and they were obviously the first of the first responders, but firefighters from all over New York City ended up coming and working here on September 11th and in the cleanup and the aftermath as well. So come take a look at this over here. And starting here, you can actually see photos of everybody. There were 343 firefighters killed. And here's the memorial here. Sorry.
I feel like everybody knows where they were.
So even though there are obviously the official memorials, the memorial pools in the Trade Center itself, there are actually numerous smaller memorials all over New York City, not just in the area immediately surrounding the World Trade Center. So we're going to walk up just a block so we can go check out the Oculus as well. Right across the street, those buildings that you can see with the rounded tops that look identical, well, the round top and then the pyramid top. People often mistake those for part of the World Trade Center. They are not. That is the World Financial Center. Similar, but different. The Trade Center buildings themselves are the ones I've shown you. Number 1 and 7, numbers 3 and 4. So we're walking alongside number 4 right now. This is the office building entrance part of it, but it is more than just offices. Number 4 World Trade has an H&M, an Eataly. And once we get into the Oculus, you'll see there's actually quite a bit of shopping, and there are a lot of restaurants. They're just not as apparent when you're up here because most of it is underground. So you've got number 3 right here. Number 3 is the most recent to be finished. think the order of opening was 7-1-4-3. And so straight up ahead, you start to see the spikes of the Oculus. So the Oculus is a train station. It is a really, really unique design. When they started building it in particular, certainly before it was done, there was very mixed response on the design of the building. There were a lot of locals, myself included to be completely honest, that were calling it the dinosaur. It is not meant to be a dinosaur. It is meant to be stylized wings of a dove, which is why it has this winged look. I'm actually going to see if I can go out in the street here for a second, carefully. Woo! But maybe right across this way. Whoop! This is probably not a great idea, but it's fine. All right. There we go. I wanted to be able to show you the building a little bit better. Okay, I'll go up to the crosswalk like a normal person now. So the construction you see straight ahead, the one that's obviously very, very active, this is going to be something that was not in the original World Trade Center. Most of what they have rebuilt is very similar to the original in that it's office buildings. This is going to be a performing arts center, which is something that was absolutely not down here before, and I am really excited about. I think that's going to be a fantastic addition to the World Trade Center. We still have a ways to go. They are obviously much earlier in construction. So here's a look at the Oculus, designed by Santiago Calatrava. This is a major train hub now. So you can connect in this building to almost every subway line in New York City, as well as the New Jersey PATH train. So very, very helpful for the people that work here. I do want to go inside because I think to get the full effect of the building, you really have to see the inside. But I do want to point out the windows that you can see right across the top. I'll show them to you inside as well. They were placed very specifically for an interesting reason. Okay, we'll go in this way. Okay, so here's the inside of the building. Like I said, some pretty mixed responses when it was being built, but I think generally since it's opened and people could come inside, most people, myself included, really, really like the building. I think it's very different, so much light inside, and that's amazing because actually the bulk of the building that people use is underground. That's the street level that you can see right here, and we're just at the entrance. Mostly everything is down here. It still feels very light and very open. So you catch the subway straight across there. The PATH train entrance is kind of underneath where I'm standing. And then all along the side, there are these concourses that have shops, there are restaurants. So that's really nice for the people that work over here because there's not as much over here for those kinds of things. The windows are cut across the ceiling to catch the morning light. And actually on September 11th every year, they're cut and placed to follow the path that the sun takes every year on that day. So you'll have maximum sunlight on the anniversary of 9/11. We're gonna go back out this way. All right, I'm just gonna go over, make one last stop over at St. Paul's. So there were a lot of buildings that are not officially a part of the Trade Center that were very, very important in the aftermath of the attacks on September 11th and have remained very associated with the World Trade Center, even though, like I said, technically they aren't. I love this over here. It brings so much color to what is otherwise a very, very glass complex. They had all of these graffiti artist that they commissioned to come in and paint here, and just made it so colorful, gave it a little sense of fun over here. So St. Paul's is across the street. St. Paul's predates the World Trade Center by quite a bit. It is actually one of the oldest public buildings in New York City. It was built originally by Trinity Church in the 1760s. So even in the decade prior to the start of the American Revolution. So when this was built, this was actually meant to be a little satellite chapel for Trinity Church itself, which is a few blocks south of here. The congregation was growing. This was meant to accommodate the uptown parishioners. It's wild to think that there was a point that this would have been considered uptown, but in the 1760s it was. But you can see here, it is, I'm gonna turn around so you can see how close, right next to the World Trade Center. And so when the rescue and then cleanup efforts started at the Trade Center, this became sort of the headquarters for all of the rescue workers who were working here at the site. People were working very, very long shifts, and then oftentimes taking just a few hours off and then turning around and working another really, really long shift. So some of them weren't even going home in between. They would come over here to St. Paul's. St. Paul's cleared everything out inside the chapel. They put in rows of cots. They had people, doing first aid. There was a place to get food, cups of coffee. And so this was a really important spot for all of the people doing the very difficult and very emotional cleanup work. So the fence here around St. Paul's, what we're walking alongside right now, actually popped up as sort of the first unofficial 9/11 memorial. People started coming here as a civilian at the time. This was about as close as you could get to the World Trade Center. All of this was very walled off for many, many years as they did clean up and then started rebuilding. So people started leaving flowers, candles, letters, stuffed animals, all kinds of things here along the fence. The fence filled up and they decided to put in some plywood panels to give additional room. They started with 15. It ended up being over 150. So we cannot go in right now. This is not open to the public currently, but I want to see if I can give you a glimpse through the gate here. Yeah, you can see it. Oops, sorry. Right there in the churchyard, there is a bell in the churchyard that was given to us by the City of London in the aftermath of the September 11th attacks. It is rung every year on the anniversary. So St. Paul's, even though it had been standing here a long time and it had a lot of other functions in New York City prior to that, this is where George Washington had his Inauguration Day services, but it rose to the challenge in the aftermath of 9/11 and served the city in a whole new way. So I'm going to give you one last look because there's a really beautiful view right from the corner before we finish up. Around here, it's one of the best views of the Trade Center. So it was absolutely horrific event. Certainly one New Yorkers will never ever forget. But New York is a city known for resiliency. Of course, we decided to rebuild. We have rebuilt. We are rebuilding. Definitely a place you should come and visit when you're here in New York City. So thanks for joining me today. Hopefully you will subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Ring that bell so you get notifications every time we release new content. There are a lot of other walks that we can take together, not just in New York City. Check out some of our walks in other places as well. We have New Orleans, we have London, we have places all over the world. So we will see you next time.